The classroom buzzed with the soft chaos of colored pencils scraping against paper, the faint scent of crayons mingling with the chalk dust that hung in the air like a forgotten memory. Sunlight slanted through the half-drawn blinds, casting long shadows across the low tables where 22nd graders hunched over their assignments. Mrs. Ellen Price moved between them, her sensible flats whispering against the linoleum floor, offering gentle nods and murmurs of encouragement. It was art time, a sanctuary of imagination in the rigid routine of elementary school, but one boy sat apart, his small frame rigid as he gripped his pencil with unnerving focus. Simon Hale, 8 years old and whisper-quiet, stared at his blank sheet as if it held secrets only he could see. His dark hair fell over eyes that carried a weight no child should bear, eyes that darted to the window now and then, as if expecting something to rumble into view from the horizon. The other kids chattered about drawing families or pets, but Simon's hand moved with deliberate strokes, sketching the outline of a man on a motorcycle, leather jacket gleaming under an invisible sun. The bike's chrome caught phantom light, and beside it, a road sign twisted in flames, its letters melting into obscurity. At the bottom, in careful block letters, he wrote a single word: Hawk. Ellen paused behind him, her coffee mug still warm in her hand. She leaned in, expecting a superhero or a cartoon character, but the image hit her like a sudden skid on wet asphalt. The biker wasn't a fantasy. He was real, etched with details that screamed authenticity. The patch on the jacket sleeve, a stylized iron fist clutching a promise ring, the faint scar implied along the jawline. And that name, Hawk. Her breath caught, the mug trembling slightly as fragments of a buried past resurfaced. It had been over a decade, but she remembered the night vividly, the screech of tires on a deserted highway, her sister Lisa's screams echoing from the wreckage of their stalled car. A group of locals, drunk and aggressive, had cornered them, their threats turning to shoves and worse. Then, out of the darkness, the roar of engines. A lone biker on a black Harley, pulling up like a shadow-given form. He'd been broad-shouldered, mid-40s even then, with a gaze steady as forged steel. "Hawk!" Lisa had gasped later in the hospital, clutching Ellen's hand. He'd dragged the attackers off, his fists speaking where words failed, and held the line until sirens wailed in the distance. Before the police arrived, he'd knelt by Lisa's side, his voice low and gravelly. "If you ever need me to stand for you, say the word. Iron Promise doesn't forget." But the case fizzled. Reports altered, witnesses vanishing, the local sheriff's office burying it under layers of insufficient evidence. Hawk had melted away like smoke, leaving only that promise hanging in the air. Ellen straightened, her heart pounding against her ribs. Simon's drawing wasn't random. It was an echo, a child's hand reaching across years. She glanced at him, but he was lost in his work, oblivious to the storm he'd unleashed. "Simon, that's quite the picture," she said softly, her voice barely above the hum of the class. He looked up, his expression unchanging, a flicker of something, relief, fear, crossing his face before he shrugged. "It's my uncle. He helps people." "Uncle?" Lisa had a son? The pieces clicked with a painful clarity. After that night, Lisa had spiraled, moving towns, cutting ties. Whispers of a new life, a boy born in secrecy, if Simon was hers. The bell rang, jolting her from the reverie. As the children packed up, Ellen folded the drawing carefully, slipping it into her tote bag. She couldn't shake the chill that settled in her bones. That promise from Hawk, it had been a lifeline Lisa clung to in her final days, before illness claimed her quietly, leaving Simon to foster homes and fragmented stories. Ellen had only learned of her nephew months ago through a distant relative, but the details were hazy, protected by the very silence that had doomed the original case. Falsified logs, a sheriff in someone's pocket. It reeked of the corruption that festered in small towns like this one, where justice bent to the highest bidder. By afternoon, with Simon safely on the bus, Ellen sat at her desk, the empty classroom echoing her unease. Her fingers hovered over her phone. Iron Promise, the club Hawk rode with. She'd heard rumors, a brotherhood of veterans and outcasts, bound by codes older than the roads they claimed. They had a public line for community matters, listed on a faded website that screamed authenticity. No frills, just a number and a warning. We keep our word. Was this a coincidence? A child's doodle born of bedtime tales? Or was it fate's rough hand dragging the past into the light? She dialed, the ringtone cutting through the quiet like a distant engine revving. A gruff voice answered on the third ring. Iron Promise, who's this? Mrs. Ellen Price, she said, her mouth dry. I have something you need to see. It's about Hawk. A drawing from one of my students. It has his name. Silence stretched, then a low rumble. Send it over. We'll see what the road remembers. Across town, in the shadow of a weathered garage where the air smelled of oil and welding sparks, Tom Hawk Daniels wiped grease from his hands on a rag that had seen better days. At 47, the years had etched lines around his eyes, souvenirs from too many sun-baked runs and nights staring down the barrel of regret. The Iron Promise clubhouse hummed with activity, brothers tuning bikes, the clank of tools punctuating laughter that masked deeper scars. Hawk leaned against his Harley, its paint chipped from 1,000 miles, nursing a coffee that had gone cold. His phone buzzed, a secure line only the club used. He glanced at the screen, the attached image loading slowly. The drawing hit him square in the chest. A kid's hand, but the details were knife-sharp. The burning sign. That was the old Route 47 marker torched in the aftermath of Lisa's ambush to cover tracks, and his jacket the patch. It was like staring into a mirror held by a ghost. Lisa's boy, he muttered, the words tasting like ash. He'd failed her back then, testimony promised, but the club pulled him out when threats escalated, lives on the line. The case died, and so did his shot at redemption. But now, this summons from a child's pencil. Simon. The name Lisa had whispered in that hospital bed, begging him to watch over if things went south. Hawk's fist tightened around the phone. The past wasn't buried, it was revving back to life. He strode toward the clubhouse door, the gravel crunching under his boots. "Church?" he called to the nearest brother. "We got unfinished business." Dun! As the sun dipped low, painting the desert horizon in bloody hues, the first engines growled to life. A promise, long dormant, was about to roar. The clubhouse door swung shut behind Hawk with a heavy thud, sealing out the fading daylight and trapping the scent of stale smoke and engine oil inside. The room, a cavernous space lit by bare bulbs dangling from exposed beams, fell into a hush as brothers turned from their card games and half-empty bottles. Tables scarred from years of fists and forgotten arguments stood like sentinels, and the walls bore faded banners of the Iron Promise, iron fists intertwined with rings of vow, symbols of oaths that outlasted rust and regret. Hawk's boots echoed on the concrete floor as he crossed to the head of the long oak table, his shadow stretching long and jagged under the lights. "Church," he repeated, voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife through leather. Faces hardened. Veterans with ink-sleeved arms, a former medic nursing a knee injury from some long-ago skirmish, a young prospect whose eyes still held the fire of untested loyalty. They filed in, pulling up mismatched chairs that scraped like accusations. Jax, Hawk's right hand, a burly man with a salt-and-pepper beard and a prosthetic hand forged from necessity after a roadside blast overseas, clapped Hawk on the shoulder as he sat. "What's got the road calling us in early, brother?" Hawk slid the phone across the table, the drawing magnified on the screen. The room leaned in, the air thickening with unspoken questions. This came through the line an hour ago. Teacher from the elementary school, kid named Simon Hale, drew it. He tapped the image, zooming on the burning sign, the precise curve of the handlebars. That's no crayon fantasy. That's Route 47, the night we pulled Lisa out of that hell. Look at the patch, our promise ring, and the name, Hawk. A ripple of recognition passed through the group. Lisa's name hung in the air like exhaust fumes, stirring ghosts they'd buried deep. Back then, Iron Promise had been smaller, tighter, a band of riders who'd traded war zones for open highways, but carried the same code: protect the innocent, honor the word. Hawk had led the charge that night, a solo run, turning into a standoff when the club's network lit up with chatter about trouble on the back roads. They'd arrived as backup, engines thundering like judgment, scattering the locals before the law could twist the scene. But the aftermath? A sheriff's report doctored overnight, claiming mutual altercation, witnesses paid off or scared silent. Lisa had survived the bruises, but the silence that followed gnawed at them all. Hawk's promise to testify had been the club's vow too. Yet threats rolled in, anonymous calls warning of club runs ambushed, families targeted. They'd pulled back to protect their own, leaving justice roadkill. Rico, the club's quiet enforcer with a face mapped by faded tattoos from his prison years, squinted at the screen. Hale, that's her boy. Thought she cut ties after everything. His voice trailed, heavy with the weight of what wasn't said. Lisa had vanished into the ether, whispers reaching the club of a new town, a fresh start shadowed by fear. No one blamed her. The corruption ran deep in those hollows, sheriffs and deputies in bed with landowners who turned blind eyes to their kin's excesses. Hawk nodded, his jaw tightening like a wrench on a bolt. Simon, 8 years old, drawing memories he shouldn't have. The teacher's her sister, Ellen Price, says the kid's in foster care now. Lisa gone 6 months from some quiet illness. But this, he gestured to the phone. It's a call. From the grave, maybe. That case never closed right. Reports filed wrong, evidence vanished. I promised her I'd stand, and we walked away. Jax's prosthetic fingers drummed the table, a metallic rhythm echoing the tension. And now, sheriff's still in power last I heard. Old man Harlan, with his greased palms, and that deputy son who looks the other way. The room murmured agreement. Harlan's name was poison, tied to land deals and favors that crushed the small folk under boot heels. Iron Promise had steered clear since, focusing on charity runs and veteran outreach, but the old fire flickered now, stoked by a child's innocent lines. We reopen it, Hawk said, his voice steady as the horizon. Quiet, no guns blazing. We dig. Talk to Ellen, get eyes on the kid, see if Simon's got stories or if this is just echoes. But if it's real, we pull the thread. For Lisa, for the promise. The vote came swift, unanimous fists thumping the table like engines sinking. As they dispersed, plans sketched in low tones, Jax on recon to the school, Rico checking old contacts for Harlan's dirt, the desert night pressed against the windows, stars pricking the black like distant signals. Hawk stepped out alone, the cool air biting his skin, carrying the faint tang of sagebrush. His Harley waited, a faithful shadow under the floodlight, its tank reflecting the club's emblem like a vow etched in steel. He straddled the seat, the leather creaking under his weight, and fired the engine. The roar split the silence, a beast awakening from slumber. Not a full convoy yet, just him, riding toward the school's edge of town, where streetlights gave way to quiet neighborhoods. The wind whipped his face, tugging at the grey streaks in his hair as memories flooded back. Lisa's grateful eyes in that hospital glow, her hand squeezing his with fragile trust. Watch over us, Hawk. Promise. He'd nodded then, the weight settling like an extra saddlebag. The school loomed ahead. A squat brick building bathed in sodium yellow, playground swings swaying empty in the breeze. Hawk killed the engine a block away, coasting silent to the curb. No dramatic entrance, this was shadows and subtlety, the club's way when honor demanded more than noise. He waited, scanning the dark windows, until a figure emerged from the side door. Ellen Price, tote bag slung over her shoulder, glancing nervously over her back. She spotted him, freezing mid-step, the drawing's echo bridging the years. Hawk dismounted, hands visible and open, his voice carrying soft across the pavement. "Mrs. Price, you reached out. I'm Hawk." Her eyes widened, tracing the lines of his face against the boy's sketch, the scar, the steady gaze. "The drawing. Simon. He doesn't talk much, but he drew you like he knew you. Lisa told him stories, I think, before she swallowed, the night air thick between them. She said you promised, but it all fell apart." Hawk nodded, the admission tasting of gravel. "It did. But promises don't expire. Tell me about the boy. About what happened after." They talked under the dim street lamp, words weaving a fragile bridge. Simon's quiet days at school, flashes of fear when sirens wailed, Lisa's final whispers of, "Hawk will come." Ellen pulled a crumpled note from her bag. Lisa's handwriting faded but fierce. "If trouble finds him, call Iron Promise. They keep the word." The past uncoiled, revealing threads of neglect. Foster placements too quick. Questions about Lisa's death brushed aside, hints of the same sheriff's shadow lingering. As the clock tower chimed midnight, Hawk's phone buzzed. Jack's with first dirt. Harlan's deputy had logged a welfare check on Simon weeks before Lisa's passing, notes vague and incomplete. Coincidence, or the old rot spreading? Hawk met Ellen's gaze, the decision solidifying. "We're in. For the kid. For her." She nodded, relief cracking her composure, and they parted with a number exchanged. No fanfare, just the quiet click of purpose, engaging. Riding back, the highway blurred into streaks of blacktop, the engine's pulse matching Hawk's resolve. A child's drawing had cracked the seal. Now the flood would come. Justice, long delayed, revved toward dawn. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon like a hesitant witness, painting the desert in muted golds and greys. Hawk's Harley idled at the edge of town, its low rumble vibrating through the gravel-strewn lot of the foster home where Simon had been placed. The house was a squat, ranch-style relic, siding faded to the color of old bones, with a chain-link fence sagging under the weight of untended vines. No welcoming glow from the windows, just the sterile flicker of a porch light left on all night, buzzing faintly against the morning chill. Hawk cut the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the distant call of a crow, its cry sharp as a warning. He'd arrived alone, as planned. Jax and Rico were circling wider, Jax tailing the sheriff's deputy for any fresh patterns, Rico tapping old informants in the underbelly of the county seat. This was delicate work, threading the needle between a child's fragile world and the ghosts of unfinished oaths. Hawk adjusted his jacket, the leather creaking softly, and felt the weight of the promise ring on his finger. Iron band etched with the club's vow, a talisman against the erosion of time. Ellen had arranged the visit through social services, framing it as a family friend checking in, but the air hummed with unspoken stakes. The door opened before he could knock, revealing a harried woman in her 50s, Mrs. Harlan, no relation to the sheriff, thank the roads, wiping flour-dusted hands on an apron. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of him, the biker silhouette against the rising sun, but Ellen's call had smoothed the edges. Mr. Daniels, Simon's still eating. Come in. But keep it light. Kids had enough shadows. The kitchen smelled of burnt toast and instant coffee, a far cry from the open-road freedom Hawk knew. Simon sat at a scarred formica table, spooning cereal into a bowl with mechanical precision, his small frame swallowed by an oversized hoodie. The drawing's intensity lingered in his features, the same focused gaze, dark hair tousled as if from restless sleep. He didn't look up as Hawk entered, but his spoon paused mid-air, a subtle tension rippling through his shoulders. "Morning, Simon," Hawk said, voice low and even, pulling out a chair without invitation. He sat across from the boy, keeping his hands visible on the table, palms up like a truce. "Heard you made quite the picture at school. Mind if I see it again?" Simon's eyes flicked up then, wary but curious, tracing Hawk's face as if matching it to the sketch in his mind. Mrs. Harlan hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, but said nothing. After a beat, Simon nodded, sliding a folded paper from under his placemat, the original drawing creased from handling. Hawk unfolded it carefully, the crayon lines vivid in the morning light. The biker astride the machine, flames licking the signpost, a sense of motion frozen in innocence. "This is good work," Hawk murmured, tracing the patch with a calloused finger. "Real good. You got the details right, the way the iron fist grips tight." The boy shifted, his voice emerging small but steady. "Mom said you were like a guardian. From stories. The bad men came and you made them stop." He glanced away toward the window where the desert stretched barren and unforgiving. "She said, if I ever needed help, draw this. So people know." Hawk's chest tightened, the words landing like gravel in his throat. Lisa's ingenuity, turning a broken promise into a beacon for her son. "Your mom was brave, saved a lot of folks that night just by holding on." He leaned in slightly, the scent of motor oil on his clothes mingling with the kitchen's domestic haze. "What else did she tell you about after?" Simon's spoon clinked against the bowl, a hesitant rhythm. "The police came, but they didn't listen. Said it was nothing. Mom got scared, we moved. Then she got sick, quiet-like. The man in the badge visited once, asked questions, said he'd take care of me if she couldn't." His voice cracked on the last word, eyes dropping to the table. "But he looked at me funny, like I was trouble." The pieces slotted into place with a cold click. Harlan's deputy, sniffing around before Lisa's end, welfare checks that smelled of control rather than care. Hawk kept his expression neutral, but inside, the old fury stirred. A engine revving low. "That man, he ever come back? After?" Simon shook his head, but the fear lingered in his posture, shoulders hunched against invisible threats. Mrs. Harlan cleared her throat from the doorway. "Social services handles it all. Boy's safe here." But her tone wavered, laced with the unease of small-town whispers, fosters caught in the web of local power plays. Hawk nodded to her, then back to Simon. "Listen, kid, that drawing, it's more than art, it's a signal. Your mom's stories weren't just tales, they were true, and I'm here because of them. Iron promise. We ride for promises like that. You need anything, you draw it, or you call." He slid a simple card across the table, club colors embossed, but no address, just a number. Simon took it, fingers brushing the paper like it held magic. As Hawk stood, the boy looked up fully for the first time, a spark of something, hope maybe, breaking through the clouds in his eyes. "You'll fix it, like in the stories." Hawk rested a hand on the chair back, the wood rough under his palm. "We'll try. For her." The words carried the weight of the club's oath, heavy as the desert heat building outside. He stepped into the yard as Mrs. Harlan saw him out, the screen door slapping shut behind. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth, and Hawk pulled out his phone. Jax's text waited. Deputies been spotted at the county archives, pulling old files on unresolved incidents. Rico chimed in seconds later. Harlan's got ties to a land syndicate. Lisa's old place was on contested ground, coercion dressed as protection. Hawk mounted his bike, the kickstand scraping gravel, and fired the engine. The roar shattered the morning calm, drawing stares from neighboring windows, curtains twitching like nervous eyes. He didn't care. Subtlety had its limits when corruption festered. Throttling out onto the two-lane road, the wind clawed at his face, carrying the dry scent of creosote bushes. The foster home shrank in his mirrors, but Simon's drawing burned in his mind, a child's plea etched in colour. By midday, the clubhouse thrummed with purpose. Brothers gathered around a makeshift map on the pool table. Faded county lines marked with pins, notes scribbled in Hawk's precise hand. Jax laid out the recon. The deputy's visits to Simon weren't random. Logs showed follow-ups, tied to Lisa's medical bills, unpaid and mounting, with Harlan's office assisting in waivers that smelled of strings attached. Rico added the dirt. Whispers from a barfly ex-deputy bought off years back to alter the ambush report, claiming the attackers were upstanding locals defending property. "This ain't coincidence," Hawk said, pacing the room, his boots thudding against the worn planks. The air hung thick with tension, the hum of a distant fan stirring banners that whispered of past rides. Lisa's death, quiet illness, they say, but what if it wasn't? Poisoned well water from that syndicate fight, or just stress breaking her down while Harlan's boot pressed. The room fell silent, the moral weight settling like dust after a storm. Jax's prosthetic hand clenched. "We ride clean, but we ride now. Get to the archives, pull the originals. Testify this time, no pulling back." Hawk stopped at the window, gazing at the bikes lined up like soldiers, chrome glinting under the relentless sun. Redemption wasn't a straight road. It twisted through regrets and required the brotherhood to hold the line. For Simon, for Lisa's fading echo, they'd unearth the truth. Falsified pages be damned. As the group mobilized, engines firing in sequence, a symphony of resolve, Hawk felt the past's grip loosen just a fraction. The drawing had summoned them. Now the promise would deliver. But in the distance, thunderheads gathered on the horizon, dark and inevitable, hinting at the storm justice would unleash. The thunderheads rolled closer as the Iron Promise convoy cut through the midday haze, a line of Harleys slicing the desert like knives through parchment. Hawk led the pack, his bike's growl steady against the rising wind that whipped sand across the cracked asphalt. Jax flanked him on the right, Rico on the left, with three more brothers bringing up the rear, enough muscle for presence, not provocation. The county archives loomed ahead, a squat concrete bunker on the outskirts of town, its faded sign peeling like old skin under the relentless sun. No grand courthouse here, just a repository of dusty secrets guarded by bureaucrats who'd long since traded vigilance for complacency. Hawk signaled a pull-off a quarter-mile out, the engines falling silent in a cascading hush that left only the wind's low moan. They dismounted, leather creaking and boots crunching gravel, forming a loose circle under the sparse shade of a Joshua tree. Its twisted limbs clawed at the sky, mirroring the knot in Hawk's gut. "We go in quiet," he said, voice gravel rough from the road. "Jax, you and me handle the front desk, family friend angle, looking for Lisa Hale's old records. Rico, take the back with the prospects, eyes on anyone sniffing around. No badges flashed, no engines near the door. This is about truth, not turf." Jax nodded, adjusting the strap of a worn satchel slung over his shoulder. Inside, a slim recorder and a flash drive. Tools for capturing what paper couldn't hide. His prosthetic hand gleamed dully in the light, a reminder of battles won and lost. Harlan's crew knows these halls better than their own homes. If the deputy's been pulling files, they'll have scrubbed what they could. Rico spat into the dust, his tattooed knuckles flexing. "I've got a contact inside, janitor with a grudge. He'll point us to the unredacted stacks if they're still breathing. The air carried the sharp tang of ozone, the storm's promise thickening the heat. Hawk felt the weight of Simon's drawing in his jacket pocket, folded like a talisman, its crayon flames a spark against the corruption's chill. This wasn't vengeance, it was restitution, honoring a vow that had frayed but never snapped. For the boy who'd drawn a guardian from bedtime whispers, for Lisa's fading echo in hospital sheets. The club wasn't storming gates. They were reclaiming what silence had stolen. They split, walking the last stretch on foot, shadows merging with the heat shimmer rising from the pavement. The archives door swung open with a pneumatic sigh, exhaling cool, musty air laced with the faint mildew of forgotten ledgers. Inside, fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead, casting a sterile pallor on linoleum floors worn to grey. A clerk behind the counter, a wiry man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses perched on a beakish nose, looked up from a flickering monitor. His name tag read Mr. Ellis, and his eyes narrowed at the influx of leather and grit. "Research?" Ellis asked, tone clipped, fingers hovering over a keyboard as if it were a shield. Hawk stepped forward, hands loose at his sides, the club's patch a subtle glint on his sleeve. "Old records, Hale family, from about 10 years back. Road incident on Route 47. We're tying up loose ends for a relative." He slid a forged letter across the counter, Ellen's signature, notarized by a club ally, vague enough to pass muster without waving red flags. Ellis scanned it, lips pursing. Those files are archived deep, might take time. But his gaze lingered on Hawk's face, a flicker of recognition or wariness crossing his features. Harlan's reach extended here. Clerks like Ellis survived by knowing which winds blew foul. Jax leaned in casually, his voice a low rumble. "Appreciate the help. We've got a kid waiting on answers. Makes the wait worthwhile." The clerk hesitated, then keyed in the search, the printer whirring to life with reluctant obedience. Minutes stretched like taffy, the room's silence broken only by the distant hum of a ventilation fan and the occasional shuffle from back rooms. Rico's team slipped through a side corridor, ghosts in the stacks, while Hawk's mind replayed Simon's words from the foster kitchen, the deputy with the funny look, questions laced with threat. Protection or predation masked as duty. Finally, Ellis returned with a manila folder, edges frayed and stamped, "Closed insufficient evidence." Hawk's pulse quickened as he cracked it open under the desk lamp's harsh glow, reports yellowed with age. Witness statements clipped short, photos blurred but unmistakable, the torched signpost, skid marks fading into scrub, but the narrative twisted. "Mutual scuffle among travelers," it claimed, no mention of the locals' aggression, Lisa's bruises airbrushed to minor abrasions. A supplementary note initialed by Deputy Harlan himself dismissed further inquiry as resource drain. "This is bullshit," Jax muttered, snapping a discreet photo with his phone. The air in the room grew heavier, the storm outside rattling windows with the first fat drops of rain. Before Hawk could respond, footsteps echoed from the hall, heavy, deliberate. The deputy emerged, rain-slicked jacket dripping onto the floor, his face a mask of feigned surprise. Mid-40s, broad as a doorframe, with the sheriff's insignia pinned like a badge of entitlement. "Gentlemen," he drawled, eyes locking on Hawk with predatory gleam. "Heard we had visitors. Something about old business." Hawk closed the folder slowly, meeting the gaze without flinching. The room shrank, tension coiling like a spring. "Just closing loops, deputy, for a friend who passed without peace." The deputy's smile didn't reach his eyes, a thin line cracking his weathered skin. "Peace is what we provide here. Harlan's office buried that noise years ago for good reason. Roads get slippery. Folks misremember." He glanced at Ellis, who busied himself with paperwork, then back. "Kid's drawing started this, huh? Cute. But stirring graves? That's trouble. Jack shifted, his prosthetic hand flexing audibly, but Hawk raised a palm, subtle, steady. No fists today, words as weapons. Misremembered or rewritten? Lisa Hale deserved better. Her boys asking questions now. We aim to answer. Rain hammered the roof, a drumbeat underscoring the standoff. The deputy leaned on the counter, voice dropping to a confidential hiss. Walk away, biker. Club's charity runs are fine, but this? Syndicate owns half the county, land Lisa squatted on. Case stays shut or visits to the foster turn official. Boys' welfare, you understand. The threat landed like a boot to the ribs, Simon's face flashing in Hawk's mind, the spark of hope in the kitchen light. Redemption demanded more than retreat. It required the line held, the promise unbroken. Welfare's a two-way street, deputy. Truth has a way of revving up. Rico appeared then, silent from the shadows, a nod signaling he'd copied the unredacted originals, hidden duplicates in a locked cabinet untouched by Harlan's purge. The deputy straightened, sensing the shift, but said nothing more, retreating with a final glare that promised reprisal. Outside, the storm broke fully, sheets of rain blurring the world into grey. The convoy reformed under the overhang, water sluicing from jackets, engines coughing to life against the downpour. Hawk throttled hard, leading them back toward the clubhouse, the folder's secrets burning in his satchel. Corruption's roots ran deep, but iron promise was the axe, family chosen, oaths eternal. As they vanished into the deluge, thunder cracked overhead, a celestial vow that justice, once unearthed, would not be resealed. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button to show your support. The rain lashed the convoy like a vengeful spectre, turning the highway into a slick ribbon of black that reflected the erratic flash of lightning. Hawk's Harley cut through the downpour, water sheeting off his visor in relentless waves, the engine's roar muffled to a guttural snarl under the storm's fury. Behind him, the brothers rode tight formation, taillights blurring into red halos through the deluge, Jax's bike weaving slightly as runoff pooled in treacherous dips, Rico's steady growl anchoring the rear. The air reeked of wet leather and ozone, sharp against the metallic tang of exhaust that clung to their clothes. Hawk's grip tightened on the handlebars, knuckles white beneath sodden gloves, the folder from the archives secured in his saddlebag like contraband from a heist. Truth, unearthed and dripping, weighed heavier than the bike beneath him. They pulled into the clubhouse lot as the storm peaked, thunder rumbling like an approaching armada. Engines sputtered to silence, one by one, and the riders dismounted under the overhang, shaking off water like dogs from a swim. The gravel muddied under their boots, sucking at heels as they filed inside, the door banging shut against the gale. The room, still humming from earlier plans, now carried the chill of the wild, rain dripping from jackets to form dark pools on the concrete floor. Hawk stripped off his helmet, grey hair plastered to his forehead, and tossed the satchel onto the oak table with a wet thud. "Light it up," he said, voice cutting through the patter on the tin roof. Jax flicked on the overheads, the bare bulbs casting stark shadows that danced like uneasy allies. The folder spilled open under the glare, pages curling at the edges from the damp. Brothers crowded in, sleeves rolled up, the scent of damp denim mingling with the ever-present oil residue. Rico spread the documents flat, his tattooed fingers tracing faded ink. Original witness logs, unredacted and brittle, contradicting the sanitized version they'd glimpsed earlier. "Look here," he grunted, pointing to a scrawled addendum buried in the stack. An anonymous tip from the night of the ambush. Locals tied to Harlan's land syndicate, pressuring Lisa's family to vacate disputed acres. The report noted potential coercion, but a thick black line crossed it out, initialed by the deputy himself. Jax's prosthetic hand hovered, snapping photos methodically. This ties the knots. Ambush wasn't random, syndicate muscle clearing the road for their grab. Harlan buried it to keep the payoffs flowing. Hawk leaned against the table, the wood cool under his palms, staring at a grainy photo of the torch signpost. Flames frozen in time, much like the ones in Simon's drawing. The boy's face flickered in his mind, that spark of hope amid cereal bowls and foster unease. And Lisa's end, quiet illness they called it. But these medical waivers, signed off by the sheriff's office right before she faded, what if it was the stress? Or worse, water from that contested well, tainted to push her out? The room fell quiet, the moral rot seeping in like groundwater. Iron Promise had seen enough shadows in war zones and back alleys, authority twisted into a noose for the vulnerable. This wasn't just a cold case, it was a chain, linking a roadside nightmare to a widow's grave, now threatening her orphaned son. Jax's phone buzzed, shattering the hush, a text from Ellen, time-stamped frantic. Deputy showed at the school, questioning Simon about family visitors. Kids shaken, help? Hawk's jaw clenched, the promise ring biting into his skin as he twisted it. Harlan's reach, slithering closer. Mount up, he barked, the command rippling through the group like a starter fluid igniting. No full church this time. Action over debate. Jax, Rico, with me to the school. Prospects, lock this down. Call our lawyer contact. Get papers drawing for temporary guardianship. We're not letting that snake near the boy. The storm had eased to a persistent drizzle as they roared out, tires hissing on wet pavement, the clubhouse shrinking in the mirrors like a fortress left behind. Town streets gleamed under sodium lamps, puddles mirroring the club's leathers as they approached the elementary. The building squatted dark now, save for a single light in the office wing, Ellen's burning late like a beacon. Hawk killed his engine at the curb, the sudden quiet amplifying the drip of eaves and the distant wail of a siren, innocuous but ominous. They moved as a unit, boots splashing through shallow streams, shadows merging with the night. Ellen met them at the side door, her face pale under the fluorescent spill, tote bag clutched like a shield. He cornered Simon after hours, said it was a routine chat. But the boy froze up, mentioned the drawing, asked if he had dangerous friends. I sent him to the counselor, but... Her voice cracked, eyes darting to the empty playground where swings creaked in the breeze. Simon huddled inside, visible through the glass. Small frame curled on a bench, drawing absent-mindedly with a stubby pencil. Lines that might summon guardians anew. Hawk stepped forward, his presence a wall against the chill. You did right calling. We're pulling him out. Safe house with the club, till we sort this. Ellen nodded, relief etching lines around her eyes, the sisterly bond to Lisa bridging the gap. He needs this. Stories of you kept her going. Now they might save him. Rico slipped past, gathering the boy's things with quiet efficiency. A backpack, a jacket too big. While Jack scanned the lot for tails, his gaze sharp as a hawk's. Simon looked up as they approached, pencil pausing mid-stroke. The fear in his eyes softened at Hawk's nod, replaced by a tentative trust. The man with the badge. He said you'd take me away if I talked. His voice was a whisper, carrying the weight of bedtime fears turned real. Hawk knelt to his level, the linoleum cool against his knee, rain scent clinging to his jacket. No one's taking you anywhere you don't want, but your mom's promise, it's ours now. We ride together. Family like that doesn't break. He extended a hand, calloused and steady. Simon took it, small fingers gripping with surprising strength, the contact sealing an unspoken oath. They bundled him into Jax's truck. Discreet, no bikes for the kids' sake, the convoy forming a protective wedge as they slipped toward the club's outskirts safe house, a modest cabin tucked in the scrublands. The drive wound through arroyos, slick with runoff, stars peeking through thinning clouds like hesitant witnesses. Inside the cabin, lamplight glowed warm against pine walls, a far cry from foster sterility. Simon settled on a cot with a blanket, the drawing propped nearby like a sentinel. "Will you tell me a real story?" he asked, voice muffled by exhaustion. Hawk sat on the edge, the wooden frame creaking. "Once, a rider made a vow to a woman in trouble. Roads got rough, but the club held the line, kinda like now." The boy smiled faintly, eyelids drooping as sleep claimed him under the watchful eyes of the brotherhood. Back at the clubhouse by midnight, Hawk paced the map-strewn table, the storm's remnants pattering outside. The files confirmed it. Syndicate pressure, Harlan's complicity, Lisa's decline, a casualty of silence truth. But escalation loomed, the deputy's threat a prelude to raids or worse. "We go public tomorrow," Hawk decided, voice ironclad. "Lawyer files for case reopening, we testify, clean, with evidence. No more shadows." The brothers nodded, fists bumping in solidarity, the air electric with purpose. As dawn edged the horizon, painting the desert in silver promise, Hawk stepped onto the porch, coffee steaming in his hand. Simon safe, the past exhumed, the wheel turned, but Harlan's storm brewed darker. Redemption rode on the edge of confrontation, oaths demanding their due. The engines would roar again, carrying justice's thunder. The first rays of morning sliced through the cabin's thin curtains, turning the dust motes into fleeting sparks as Hawk stirred from the worn armchair where he'd kept vigil. The air inside carried the faint, comforting aroma of pine resin and cooling embers from the night's small fire, a bulwark against the desert's creeping chill. Simon slept soundly on the cot, his chest rising and falling in even rhythm. The drawing clutched loosely in one hand, like a talisman warding off dreams. Hawk rubbed the stubble on his jaw, the scrape of calluses against skin, a quiet anchor in the stillness. Outside, the safe-house's gravel drive whispered under a light breeze, but the peace felt fragile, like glass before a stone. Jax emerged from the kitchenette, 2 mugs of black coffee steaming in his grip, the prosthetic hand steady despite the faint tremor from old phantom pains. He handed one to Hawk, settling into a creaky rocker with a sigh that spoke volumes. "Prospects are rotating watch. Rico's got eyes on the county roads. No tails yet, but Harlan's boys don't sleep easy after a poke like yesterday." His voice was low, gravelly from years of barked orders in sand-swept ops, eyes scanning the boy with a protectiveness born of shared scars. Iron Promise wasn't blood, but it bound tighter. Veterans like them, piecing families from the wreckage of what war and life tore apart. Hawk sipped the bitter brew, the heat grounding him as memories clawed back. That hospital room years ago, Lisa's frail form haloed by beeping monitors, her whisper sealing the vow. "Watch him if I can't." He'd nodded, the club's code igniting like a spark plug, but the pullback had haunted him, threats to brothers' kin, a run ambushed in retaliation. Regret tasted like rusted chain, but Simon's presence polished it, turning shame to steel. The lawyers filing by noon, reopened the case on falsified reports, evidence from the archives, Ellen's testimony. The kids drawing as Exhibit A. We testify clean, no shadows. Jax nodded, his beard twitching in a half-smile. Harlan'll fight dirty. Syndicate's got judges in pocket, media whispers about outlaw bikers meddling. But we've got the originals, unredacted truth. And the boy's story, that's the gut punch. He glanced at Simon, who stirred then, eyes fluttering open to the unfamiliar warmth. The boy sat up, rubbing sleep from his face, the oversized blanket pooling around him like a discarded cloak. For a moment, fear flickered, but Hawk's steady gaze held it at bay. "Morning, kid. Breakfast?" Simon nodded shyly, unfolding the drawing and placing it on the table like an offering, the cabin filled with simple motions, eggs sizzling in a cast-iron skillet, the sizzle punctuating Jax's easy chatter about club rides, tales stripped of grit to paint heroes in broad strokes. Simon ate quietly, but his questions came in bursts. "Did Mom really know you? Like in the picture?" Hawk met his eyes over the plate, the sincerity cutting deeper than any blade. She did. Saved my faith in promises that night. Now we're returning the road. By mid-morning, the cabin thrummed with arrivals. Rico rolling up on his softail, engine purring to a halt, followed by two more brothers in an unmarked van carrying supplies and a secure line to the lawyer. The group formed a loose circle on the porch, the scrublands stretching endless under a sky clearing to merciless blue, sagebrush whispering secrets to the wind. Rico laid out fresh intel, voice a low rumble. Deputies been burning phone lines, calls to the syndicate head, some developer with deep pockets. They're spinning it as club aggression, but I've got a recording from that barfly. Confirms the payoff for the altered report. Harlan's son took the bribe himself. The moral coil tightened, dilemmas etching lines on Hawk's face. Testify now, and reprisals could hit the club. Raids on the clubhouse. Harassment of veteran outreach. Hold back, and Simon stayed a pawn, Foster whispers, turning to iron bars. We ride the edge, Hawk decided, the words heavy as saddle weight. Public presser at noon, local diner, neutral ground. Ellen brings the drawing. We show the files. No threats, just facts. Let the truth's engine run over their lies. The brothers murmured assent. Fists clasping in the old ritual, iron rings clinking like vows renewed. As they prepped, Simon watched from the doorway, pencil in hand, sketching idly on a notepad, bikes in convoy, a boy riding shotgun. Hawk knelt beside him, the wood planks rough under his knee. Scared? The boy shrugged, but his lines trembled slightly. A little, but you promised. Those words echoed Lisa's, bridging the years with poignant force. Hawk placed a hand on his shoulder, the contact warm against the morning's lingering cool. Family chosen. We don't break. This ends today, or we ride till it does. The convoy assembled midday, engines sinking in a thunderous harmony that shook the cabin's windows. Hawk lifted Simon onto the van's passenger seat, buckled secure beside Jack's, while the Harleys formed flanks, chrome flashing under the sun like blades drawn for honor, not blood. The road to town wound through arroyos still damp from the storm, tires humming over puddles that mirrored the sky's vast indifference. Hawk led, wind tugging at his jacket, the promise ring glinting as he throttled steady. Sensory rush enveloped him, the bite of air on exposed skin, the faint petrol whiff mingling with desert bloom, the horizon beckoning like Judgment Day. The diner squatted on the town's main drag, a relic of chrome and neon with checkered floors and the perpetual sizzle of grease from the grill. They pulled in as locals gawked, engines cutting to expectant hush. Ellen waited inside, the drawing rolled in her tote, her face a mask of resolve, etched by sisterly grief. Reporters, two from the county rag, one indie blogger with a camera, huddled at a corner booth, drawn by the lawyer's anonymous tip. No Harlan yet, but his shadow loomed in the patrol car, idling across the street, deputy glaring through rain-streaked glass. Hawk entered last, Simon at his side, the boy's hand small but firm in his. The air inside hummed with tension, coffee steam curling like unspoken accusations. He took the floor by the counter, voice carrying clear over the clink of spoons. 10 years ago, a woman named Lisa Hale needed help on a dark road. Iron promise answered. But justice got buried, reports twisted, promises silenced. He unrolled the drawing, pinning it beside photocopies of the files, the crayon flames vivid against black and white lies. Ellen spoke next, voice steady. This is her son's memory and her sister's fight. Simon nodded when prompted, whispering, Mom said, tell the truth. Murmurs rippled, cameras clicking like loading chambers. The door banged open then, Sheriff Harlan himself, paunch straining his uniform, flanked by the deputy. His face twisted in feigned outrage, boots thudding authoritative. This circus ends, clubs stirring trouble, boys' welfare at risk. But Hawk stood unmoved, the brotherhood a wall behind him. Risk? From truths you hid? We've got the original, Sheriff. Payoffs, coercion, Lisa's land grab covered in ambush, testify fair or the feds get the tape. Harlan's eyes narrowed, the bluff cracking under scrutiny. Reporters leaned in, the moral tide shifting like sand in wind. No fists flew, justice's quiet roar drowned the bluster. As the sheriff retreated with a snarled warning, Hawk felt the past's chains loosen. Redemption not in vengeance, but in light piercing the veil. Simon squeezed his hand. A silent vow echoed in the club's unyielding gaze. Outside, engines revved softly, the convoy forming once more. Harlan's storm broke not in fury, but fracture, the case reopening by evening wire, syndicate whispers turning to howls. For the boy, the guardian drawn in crayon, the road ahead gleamed with hard-won dawn. The diner's neon sign flickered erratically in the post-storm haze, casting erratic red pulses across the parking lot like a heartbeat refusing to fade. Hawk stood at the window's edge, the glass cool against his forearm, watching the patrol car's taillights recede into the dusty afternoon. Harlan's retreat wasn't surrender, bluster masked as strategy, but the sheriff's blanched face betrayed the fracture. Originals exposed, recordings primed for higher eyes. The syndicate's web snagged on unyielding truth. Inside, the air hung thick with the residue of confrontation. Coffee grounds bitter on the tongue, the faint sizzle of bacon from the grill underscoring the hush that followed Harlan's exit. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras stowed, but questions lingering like exhaust trails. Simon clung to Hawk's side, his small hand warm and trusting in the biker's calloused grip, the boy's eyes wide but no longer shadowed by that foster home fear. The drawing lay unfurled on the counter, its crayon flames now a symbol etched in the room's collective memory, bridging a child's innocence to the club's ironclad oath. Ellen hovered nearby, her shoulders easing for the first time in hours, a tentative smile cracking the grief lines around her mouth. "You did it," she whispered, voice threading through the clatter of plates as the diner stirred back to life. Lisa would. She'd be proud. Hawk nodded, the words settling like gravel dust after a long ride, heavy but cleansing. Pride wasn't the goal. Fulfillment was. The promise ring on his finger glinting under the fluorescent hum, a reminder that oaths survived rust and regret. Jax clapped a hand on Simon's shoulder, his prosthetic fingers gentle, while Rico scanned the lot through the blinds, ever the sentinel. The brotherhood encircled them, leather creaking softly, a chosen family woven from scars and shared roads. Their presence a quiet thunder against the corruption's fading echo. By evening, the wires hummed with the story's ripple. County prosecutor's office announcing a formal review, feds looping in on the syndicate ties, Harlan's name dragged into the light like a tire iron from the trunk. No arrests yet. The wheels turned slow in small-town machinery, but the momentum built, inexorable as a convoy cresting a rise. Hawk led the group back to the safe house as dusk bled purple across the scrub, engines purring low to spare the boy the roar. The cabin welcomed them with lamplight spilling warm onto the porch, sagebrush whispering in the cooling breeze, the scent of damp earth mingling with pine smoke from the chimney. Simon settled on the rug by the hearth, knees drawn up, pencil dancing across fresh paper, not fear now, but curiosity, sketching a horizon dotted with bikes under a rising sun. Hawk watched from the armchair, the fire's crackle punctuating the quiet, shadows playing across his weathered face. 47 years had carved him deep, losses from war's haze, the ambush's fallout, Lisa's fading whisper. But this moment polished the edges, redemption not a blaze, but a steady glow. "What happens next?" Simon asked, looking up, his voice steadier, laced with the tentative wonder of a story turning real. Hawk leaned forward, elbows on knees, the leather of his jacket sighing. Truth rolls out like the road ahead. Case reopens clean, your drawing, the files, our words. Harlan's grip slips. Justice catches what he dropped. He paused, the firelight catching the scar along his jaw, a souvenir from that long-ago night. And you? Ellen's stepping up, family ties we didn't know. Foster papers shift to her, with the club watching your back. No more shadows alone. The boy's nod was solemn, pencil pausing as understanding bloomed. Jax entered then, carrying a tray of sandwiches, simple fare. Bread fresh from the clubhouse bake, but the gesture carried weight, the brotherhood's way of mending what broke. They ate in companionable silence, the cabin's walls holding the warmth against the night's deepening chill, stars pricking the velvet sky outside like distant promises kept. Rico's phone buzzed sporadically, updates from contacts, deputy sidelined pending review, syndicate whispers fracturing into pleas for deals. No violence stained the victory, it was the power of integrity. Lealdad inked in testimony, the moral force of a vow outlasting the cynic's blade. As midnight neared, Ellen arrived, her sedan crunching gravel softly, headlights cutting the dark like hope's first light. She embraced Simon fiercely, the reunion a quiet tide washing away years of separation. Sister to sister, aunt to nephew, echoes of Lisa in their shared gaze. "We'll figure the rest," she said to Hawk, gratitude etching her features. "Thank you for standing when no one else would." Hawk shook her hand, the contact firm, then turned to the boy. "Draw what you want now, Simon. The road's open." The child smiled, a genuine curve that lit the room brighter than the fire, and as the group dispersed, brothers mounting up for the clubhouse run, engines murmuring farewell, Hawk lingered on the porch. The desert night enveloped him, cool air carrying the faint tang of creosote and freedom, the horizon a blank canvas under the moon's silver sheen. Riding back alone, the Harley thrummed beneath him, wind tugging at his collar, the engine's pulse syncing with his heartbeat. The past's burdens lightened, not erased, regrets lingered like faded tattoos, but redeemed in action, the club's legacy fortified. Iron promise endured, veterans bound by more than blood, honoring the lost through the living. Simon's future gleamed ahead, guarded by family chosen, justice's quiet roar echoing into tomorrow. At the clubhouse, gates swung wide under floodlights, brothers gathering in the glow, fists raised in salute, the iron fist banner stirring gently. Hawk dismounted, boots solid on home ground, and raised his voice in the ritual close. "For Lisa, for the boy, promise kept." The chorus rumbled back, a vow eternal as the first stars wheeled overhead. In the days that followed, the threads wove tight, case files unsealed, Harlan resigning amid probes, the land returned to those it crushed. Simon thrived under Ellen's roof, his drawings now of open skies and endless rides, bedtime stories trading fear for legacy. Hawk visited often, uncle in spirit, the scar on his soul mending in the boy's trusting eyes. Redemption wasn't a finish line, but a horizon. Pursued with the brotherhood's unbreaking wheel, honor as the true north, family the fuel, justice the road forever traveled. Thank you for riding this journey with us. If these tales of promise and heart resonate, subscribe for more stories where loyalty lights the way.